If you ever find yourself in a creative rut, just strumming the same old chords, feeling like you're hitting a roadblock with your songwriting, I am here for you in this video. What I want to do is show you 5 really interesting, out-of-the-box, captivating chord progressions that are hopefully going to spark the creative fire again. These chord progressions are designed to be accessible to anyone who has a few basic chord shapes under their left hand, and you certainly do not need an in-depth understanding of music theory to put these into practice right now. So let's dive in. So all the chord progressions I'm going to show you from easy to hard are going to use at least one chord that is outside the key. But we need to know what chords are inside the key. We need to know what chords form the conventional chord progressions to really understand which chords are outside the key, why they're working, and why they create such a cool sound. So let's do it. When we talk about chords as a set of numbers, it's important to understand what are the basic chords that are actually inside a major key. We have 1 major, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 major, 6 minor, and 7 diminished. I'm not going to go into the music theory here. All we're going to do is look at this to understand that these 7 chords, and in fact, not even all 7 of them, like 4 of them, form the basis for like 95% of all the songs ever written. And the reason you're here watching this video is that they are also the source of a great deal of boredom at a certain point for a songwriter. We play through these combinations and we start to feel like, gosh, all my songs are starting to sound the same. So the first chord progression I'm going to show you is a really beautiful 4-chord progression, and this is what it looks like in the key of C. So let's break that chord progression down a little bit. What we have in the key of C is the 1 major chord. Now, if we look inside the actual chords in the key of C, the 2 chord is a 2 minor, which would be a D minor. So this is our chord, our first chord in this chord progression that is not inside the key of C. This is a borrowed chord. Borrowed from where? It doesn't matter. All that matters is that we're going to call this chord a 2 dominant 7 chord. So this is a really lovely dominant 7 shape that we have here, and it adds a real brightness to the chord progression. So we go from the 1 major, then we get this 2 major with the dominant 7 on top, and then we're going to play the 4 major chord, which in the key of C is F. And then we're going to transform this F chord into an F minor 6. So it's this note here that is the 6 of that chord. And the really important thing here is that it's a 4 minor chord. And again, 4 minor is outside the key of C. So we actually have 2 borrowed chords in this chord progression, and it just sounds so beautiful. For our second chord progression, I'm actually going to change keys. So I'm going to go to the key of D major, but again, when I play the D major chord, we're going to call that 1 major. So here's the chord progression, and then we'll break it down. This is a really simple and super beautiful 3 chord progression. The thing that makes this chord progression feel so yummy is this 5 minor 7 chord. So in the key of D major, 5 minor 7 is A minor 7. If we look inside the key of D, what you'll see is that the diatonic 5 chord, which is to say the regular old boring 5 chord that's normally inside the key of D is an A major, or if we wanted to voice it as a 7th chord, it would be the A dominant 7 chord, but we're not playing it as an A major chord, we're playing it as an A minor chord. And I love this minor 7 shape here. It's like so easy to play as well. So I play it like that a lot, and it sounds really nice. And playing it as the minor 7th, not just the minor triad, actually gives it a little bit of a kind of soul feel or an R&B feel. So I like that. That coloration to me is really pretty, really sort of melancholy as well. I just love it. So this move from 1 major to 5 minor and then just down to 4 major is so strong. And again, it's using the kind of brightness of the 1 major and the 4 major, but then adding in this kind of melancholy or this kind of somberness or this soulfulness by playing the 5 chord as a minor chord. So pretty. I remember hearing Brandi Carlile talk about using this chord progression in writing her incredible song, The Joke. And that chord progression is just that. You're feeling nervous, aren't you, boy? With your quiet voice and impeccable style. All right, so chord progression number 3. We're starting to get a little bit more complex here. There's going to be a couple of things going on. It's not just about borrowed chords. There's also going to be an inversion of a chord, which is going to give it some really special flavor. So here it is, and I'm going to change key again. I'm going to do this one in the key of G, where G is 1 major. So what was happening here? We're starting a really basic G major chord. So I was actually voicing it as a 3-note chord, playing the root, the 5th, and the 3rd on top. I find that really, really pretty. It's a nice minimal way to voice a chord, but you could just go for the big old G major strum, right? So we have a G major chord. The next chord that we have here is a G minor chord in the first inversion. So what are inversions? Inversions are just a way of playing the notes that are in a G minor chord, but not necessarily with G in the bass. So instead, what I have in the bass is the 3rd of the chord. So the 3rd of a G minor chord is B flat. So I'm just putting the B flat in the bass of the chord, but all of these notes are just the same notes that are in a G minor triad. So I've got G minor over B flat. And then I play this beautiful chord. That is an E flat major 7, friends. When we think about that chord in relationship to G, we call that a flat 6 major 7. Why do we call it that? Because if we look inside the regular old key of G, what we see is that the 6th chord in the key of G, if all we were doing is using the boring old chords inside the key of G, it should actually be that chord. It should be E minor. But we're not playing E minor because we're interested in doing things in a more interesting way. Instead of playing E, we're playing E flat major 7. Again, this is what's called a borrowed chord. And out of interest, what we're doing is we are actually borrowing chords from the parallel G minor key. Now that's going down a bit of a music theory rabbit hole. And again, I just don't think we need to go there in order to understand what we're doing and be able to use it really quickly. So the idea here is whatever key we're in, I happen to be in G, but whatever key you choose, you just find what the normal 6th chord is and then take it down a half step, turn it into a major 7, right? That's the immediate quick start guide to the flat 6 major 7 chord. So I've got an E flat major 7 chord, and then what am I doing? I'm moving it down to the 5 dominant 7 chord that is in the key. So you can see that there are 2 chords that are in the key and 2 chords that are outside the key. One of the things that makes this chord progression so beautiful is I'm blending chords from G major with chords from G minor. So it's starting to kind of paint with 2 palettes. I'm painting with the brightness of the major key and the kind of indigo darkness of the parallel minor key. So pretty. Okay, chord progression number 4 is really, really fun. In this chord progression, I'm actually not gonna start on the 1 major. I'm gonna start on the 6 minor of my key, and interestingly, I'm not even gonna touch the 1 chord. So I'm gonna play this here. I'm gonna start here. So what this chord is a C sharp minor 7. So technically, I could think of this as a chord progression in the key of E major. That's one way to think of it, and then call this 6. The other way to think of it is, I could think of this as a minor key chord progression, and I could think of this as 1 minor. I could say, actually, no, I'm not in the key of E major, I'm in the key of C sharp minor. It actually doesn't matter. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna call this 6 minor. I'm gonna describe this chord progression, everything as relates to a major key, just to keep things consistent, and there's no reason not to really, okay? So I'm gonna call this 6 minor. All right, so here's the chord progression. So let's talk about this chord progression in terms of what the actual chords are and what they are in relationship to each other. So this is a 6 minor 7. I move that whole chord shape down 2 frets, and now I am playing a B minor 7. On the same fret level, I'm going to turn this into an E9 chord, which means I've got an E dominant little thing going on there with a 9 on top. And then I take it down to an A major 7, which then slides 1 fret down to become a G sharp dominant 7. So that's the actual chord progression. Let's talk about it in terms of relationships of chords. So I have a 6 minor 7 chord. I'm going to call this a 5 minor 7 chord. I'm going to call this the 1 dominant 7 chord with a 9 added on top. I'm going to call this the 4 major 7, and I'm going to call this a 3 dominant 7 chord. If this were a music theory class, I would get the test wrong, in the sense that you would never in a music theory class describe this as 5 minor and 1 dominant 7. This little move here is actually a 3 chord combination that's actually called a 2-5-1. So in this little music theory divergence here, these chords are not actually happening in relationship to the key, they're happening in relationship to this chord. And the way we create that cool little sound is by having the target chord in mind, being like, what I'm gonna do is land on this 4 major 7 chord, and then these 2 chords are the 2 and 5 in relationship to that chord. I'm not gonna go any deeper than that if your brain is like, what is going on? I made a whole other video that breaks that down and explains it in great detail there. So go and check that out. In this video, I just want it to be usable and practical and applicable right now. So grab the PDF with the chord progressions written out and just have a play through it. The cool thing about this is that these are movable shapes, all right? So I'm playing it here like this. I could totally play it here. So have a play with those shapes. It's super funky. It's a very neo-soul progression. Really, really fun. All right, we come to our 5th and final super beautiful chord progression. And I love this one because it uses a diminished chord, which we haven't seen so far, but it's a diminished chord that is not the diminished chord found actually inside the key. It's a different diminished chord, okay? So I'm gonna play this in the key of A. Here I am. So I do start on A. Here is the chord progression. So we start this chord progression on an A major 7. We then go to a D sharp minor 7 flat 5, also known as a D sharp half diminished chord. This is a really cool shape to play that chord in. And the really amazing thing about this chord shape is that all I need to do is move this one finger down a fret and I end up playing the diatonic 4 major 7, which is one of the reasons why this little chord move sounds so good, because it's a really minimal movement from this diminished chord to this major 7 chord that is in the key, and that kind of chromatic movement from outside the key to something inside the key is like tension, release, tension, release. It just feels so good, right? So tension, release. And then this little thing here is a really beautiful modal cadence. So both of these chords, I've got an F major 7, which we're going to call flat 6 major 7 in relation to the key of A. Then I have a G major 7, which I'm going to call flat 7 major 7 in relationship to the key, which is A. Okay, so it gets flat 6 major 7, flat 7 major 7, 1 major 7. It's a modal cadence. It's so fun, right? So all together. Could do that all day, to be honest. There you have it, friends. 5 really beautiful, unconventional, out-of-the-box chord progressions that will hopefully get your creative juices flowing. Remember to grab the free PDF below. I'm also really keen to know from you if there are other chord progressions that really opened your mind when you learnt them and that you really desperately want other people to know. Please feel free to pop them into the comments. And if it comes from a song reference, let us know what that song is as well. I'll see you next time.